Hello and welcome back. Well, I've been wood turning for just over 2 years now, and over that time I have collected a lot of wood. As you can see here, I have wood around my metalworking bench. I have it up in racks. It's here, down on the floor, more over here, and there's wood all around the original lathe that I built as well. And that's just the wood that is in my metalworking garage. Also have piles of wood outside. The cat seems to like them, but this wood is not covered, and that's not a good way to store your wood. Otherwise you're going to get lots of cracks and it's going to be no good for wood turning. And recently I've started to accumulate piles of wood in my new wood turning shed as well, which is not good, as these piles just get in the way and you start tripping over them. A friend of a friend dropped round these two metal racks quite a while ago actually, and I initially thought about putting them into the new woodworking shed, but I don't think I'm going to have enough room in there. So I had a good idea of using these racks as wood storage racks, and the plan was to put them down the side of the new shed here between the fence, and they'll be tucked around the side out of the way so they don't have to look nice or anything like that. When you look at these racks, one of them has a shelf that's on a bit of a lean. I have no idea why it is like this or who welded it in that position, but you can see that the right hand side is 2 inches higher than the left hand side. I was going to cut that off and make it level, and then I thought, well, it's just going to be a wood storage rack, out of sight, out of mind, so it's really not going to matter. But what I wanted to do is to add a couple of steel bars in here like this, and that way I can utilize this space into two smaller spaces. First thing I need to do is cut down these two bits of rectangle bar, and it looks like my cut-off wheel is quite small, so I have to turn the piece around in the vise to finish that off. I clean the paint off the area where I'm going to weld, then clamp those bars on and weld them in place. The second rack had no support in the side here, so I cut a piece of bar and whoops, that fell out. So I'll try again, get it in there. This is closed up about 7mm. So I get it pretty close and then clamp it into place, and I weld that piece off camera. But before that I actually make sure it's the right width. The bottom of these racks is got the worst part of rust there, so I clean that up with a wire wheel on the angle grinder. Once the racks have been all cleaned up with the wire wheel, they're ready to be painted. My son came out here and gave me a hand with the painting until the fight started on the TV, and then he disappeared. I finished off both racks. They're being painted on the outside but not the inside, and that's because I want to move them around the side of the new shed while I actually have some people here to do that. There they are down the side of the new shed, and I will paint the insides a little bit later. The first thing to do is to mount them to the wall. I'm drilling through a hole for a coach screw. I actually have to drill a bigger hole through the steel for the coach screw to go through, and then that coach screw is wound in nice and tight. And I do that up a bit higher once I have the rack level, and at the front of the racks I'm propping up all the steel in the corners so that it doesn't take all the weight on these bolts here. Also at the front where the two racks butt up together, I put a couple of bolts in there with nylock nuts. The next step is to cut out the bits of wood that will go in here. This is 12mm plywood, and this is left over from the old building that we pulled down, so it's good to reuse old materials. The piece of wood goes in there like that and fits in perfect. Once all the wood has been cut up, it's all in place there, and I mark out each piece of wood where it belongs so that I can put it back once it's all been painted. While I'm painting the frame, my son is painting those wooden panels, and we need to get this done today because it's going to be raining for the next 2 days. Well, it rained for about 3 days, and as you can see here, the weather is still not good. Very windy and a lot of rain. That's the head of my friend Gordon there. He came over to help with the structure, and he was so keen to get this thing going that I forgot to put the camera on. So it's just basically a rectangle structure made from 2" by 4" rough sawn timber. We've fixed it to the wall with these coach bolts. There's 5 of them all together. And to be honest, that was pretty solid once those were screwed in. On the outside, we added 4 struts where these cross braces go. And those struts are tied back with an angle bracket at the top here. And at the bottom, they're screwed into the rack itself. This structure is really, really strong. So I'm going to have no issues with it moving or getting blown away. Corrugated sheets are put up on the top and all screwed down in the usual way. And I've got this piece of barge roll from the old building, which came in handy to go down the long edge. That's the corrugated iron and the barge roll all in place, and it looks pretty good. Now I'll work on the top end, or the high end, and I'm just putting a bit of flashing over the top there. And that's pretty much the roof all complete there with the flashing and barge rolls on. The next step is to cut out the bits of wood for the ends. And in this case I didn't have my blade deep enough, so I just have to tidy that up with some sandpaper. So the ends go on like that. This piece is a bit bowed, so I'm using some clamps to pull it all in. And I'm drilling out for 6mm bolts that I'll be putting in here. That's the bolt that goes through, and there'll be a nylock nut on the other side. Once I've fitted all the panels and drilled all the holes where they need to be, I take the panels off and they're both painted. This is the same coloured paint as what I painted the frame. Once dry, the panels are put in place and bolted onto the frame. This is a 2-man job because the bolts way in by the wall there are a bit hard to hold with both hands. This is the other end, the low end, and I don't know what came over me. I'm using non-stainless steel screws here, and they're not long enough to pull that piece in right in the corner there. So anyway, I go and get some big stainless steel screws, screw those in, and take out those other non-stainless screws. I've cut up, painted, and fitted a piece of fascia board. And now I'm putting on the first bracket for the gutter. I get the level out, and I have a little bit of fall towards the wall. And that's where the dropper is screwed onto. I need to measure where the next bracket goes, and that bracket is also screwed into place. Then I need to measure out the piece of gutter that I have and mark it out square, and then cut that with the hacksaw. I clean up the edges with a bit of sandpaper, and then I glue on a cap at the end. Once that's dry, the piece of guttering is put on, and the barge roll here on the left was a little bit in the way, but I was able to get the gutter in there okay. The last part here is to put the downpipe on, and I've screwed that on with 2 brackets, but that was below the camera so you didn't see that. And just to secure the top, I put a screw in here. Apart from the front cover, that's pretty much it. The racks are all in place and finished. Then I start to load them up with the wood from the garage and the new shed. And these polystyrene boxes fit in here quite nicely. And there is the rack, pretty much full of wood. And that's cleared out a lot of space in my garage and shed. As mentioned, I will put some covers on the front here to keep the rain out. But other than that, this project is done. I hope everyone has a great day, and once again, thanks for watching.